Okay, now the question of buying and selling ERC 721 contracts. You have some sort of thing that is an ERC 721. And by and large, most things in the real world are not like an ERC 20. They're not fungible. Real world things tend to be much more real and tangible. And, you can't just trade one for another, other than like money or things like that. So ERC 721 is more like physical goods. And one of those sites that allows you to register and trade ERC 721s is OpenSea. It is primarily driven by collectibles like CryptoKitties, but there is a bunch of different things, and you can go there and you can register your contract with them and begin trading, and you're kind of in. I mean, you don't have to worry about implementing a contract to do this or an interface to do this. You just register with them. You can set up your data for off-chain storage solutions for things like interplanetary file system or on decentralized servers, depending on how you're doing your off-chain data. So there are services. Kraken has a similar capability for setting up and trading ERC 721 type contracts. You'll notice that there is an ERC 1155, which is a multi-token contract that allows both fungible and non-fungible tokens. So these things can be set up without doing anything. But this isn't always the way you want to approach this kind of a thing. So let's take a look at a decentralized bid contract. You can search for this. I'll have it in the notes where the link is to this. But if we go into contracts, the implementation is actually not very big for the bid contract. I'm going to bring this up in an editor and we'll take a look at it that way. There's only a couple things in here that you need to see to understand what's really going on. And basically, a bid for a particular thing is for a token that is available for sale. And this does most of the work you would want for taking and transferring bids. You'll notice that there's a couple things in here like ownable, as in who owns this particular call, and pausable. Pausable means that you can stop the process if something is happening or you want to do an upgrade. There is a way to upgrade contracts. We're going to talk a little bit about that eventually. But between pausable and ownable, you have some control over what's going on in your contracts. They're not 24/7 forever, and you can't do anything. So the first thing is to take a look at place bid. And the token address is the address of the contract that holds this particular kind of token. Token ID is the actual non-fungible token. Price is what you're bidding, and duration is an amount of time in seconds since 1970. That is what you're placing as a bid. Which means for these things to happen, there is usually some sort of at the end of some period of time, we take the highest bid. So these are offered, and then you bid on them. And that is the normal way that you'll see a lot of these things done. There is a second bid that, instead of this empty string for a fingerprint that it's going to track, allows you to send in a fingerprint for the place bid. But basically, in either case, what it's doing is it's setting up the data to say, at the end of the time period, we're going to have this bid taken. Whichever person has the highest, if they've passed some threshold minimum bid value, that they will be able to acquire the token. So you'll notice it says when not paused. That again is one of these criteria that this is the internal stuff. It looks to see if it's paused, and if it is, it's not going to allow you to place bids while the token is paused. And it requires require ERC 721. I mentioned it before that there is this contract interface pattern that says that a particular contract has to have a certain interface standard met. And in this case, require ERC 721 checks that the contract at the address that is specified and given meets the requirement of being an ERC 721. And this require compostable address token ID and fingerprint means that it can have this set of requirements in terms of how it will behave. Between those two things, you're guaranteed that when you're bidding on something that you're actually talking to a correct contract that supports this minimum interface. You'll notice that they have a requirement for a price greater than 0. You actually have to have a bid of a non-zero price to be able to buy something. And it has a require that the bidder's balance, that you have sufficient funds for the price that you're sending. So you can't bid on something when you don't have enough money and then it fails because you didn't have enough in your account to be able to actually make that bid. So you bid high but can't get it because you don't have enough and keep other people from getting it. Now, it checks on the duration that you've put in for your amount of time that you're willing to have this open. And again, it does some checking that the interface is correct. All of this stuff eventually ends up being in this hash of a bid that we're going to save for later for when the timing times out. And it checks to see that for the thing that you're bidding, you only have one bid. Basically, that's this stuff. And eventually it's going to take the bids by token and save all of it. This bid structure is basically going to collect all the data and save it, and you're going to emit an event that says bid created. Now, if you think about it, that's what's involved in bidding on stuff. And later, at the end of these things, it's going to have to say, at a particular time, did we resolve the bid and did we actually pick out winners for each thing, for each time thing? So there has to be some outside stuff to drive that other outside process of, okay, the time expired, now we've got to be able to say who won the bid and transfer it. The other kinds of things that you want to see in a bidding system is you might want to be able to make a bid for something, but before it actually closes, cancel your bid for some reason. Like you bid for 10 things, but you've only got price or funds for 7, and you've gotten your 7, and you say, okay, I have to cancel my others before they close. So there's some methods like that. But basically, this is the kind of stuff that a bidding process goes through. So when you set up some token like this and you have a bidding tool, then the other criterias on these bids are all going to be when the bid closes, like, is there a minimum bid? What is the percentage fee that has to go back to the contract that's doing the bidding itself, this contract, as opposed to the fees that go on to the owner of the token? And those all get set up and saved, so everything else happens at the end of the bid. Now, this particular contract, you'll notice that has this interface on ERC 721 received. That is so that when you make a bid, the bidding contract itself acts as an intermediary. It says, I can transfer the data from this outside source to me, and here is what I do when I have received your token, and what I'm going to do at that point. So that this contract and its address can actually handle incoming tokens. And that means that this works with the ERC 721 and has the sufficient interface to be the from part and the to part in exchanges of tokens. So I'm not going to go into the details of that. If you want to go look at it, you can. Remove expired bids is a cleanup thing. And again, it has to deal with if the bids are expired, how to not delete stuff from an array, but mark it as deleted. And there's a cancel bid, as I said there would be. So, the entire thing for all of the stuff with bidding and comments when you get down to it, is only 550 lines. It's not a huge process to be able to set up your own bid as opposed to doing something like going to OpenSea and setting theirs up. So this is kind of the set of stuff that's involved in tracking real-world items or non-fungible digital assets like CryptoKitties. And if you're really interested in CryptoKitties, go searching for CryptoKitties. I know there was a Medium article, and they actually had their version 1 software was available for you to go and read. And you can see how they set up their ERC 721, which it predates Open Zeppelin having an inheritable contract for this, but they set the standard for what was going to be required in this. So that's kind of the picture in terms of what do you do and how do you get rewards. When people trade, how do you get a little piece of what they're selling it for? That's setting up in the bid. So you don't really answer that in terms of, well, where is it in the ERC 721 contract where I can set a minimum price? Well, it isn't. It's in your bidding contract or in the bidding system that you're using, or in, how you're trading these on top of that, because you've asked the wrong question. Now, what are the things about ERC 721s? They're really useful for a lot of things. I have seen systems working for ERC 721 recently that are for things like tickets. I've used it for land ownership. And the company that in Georgia that I work with, that I wrote contracts for, I based them on Open Zeppelin's ERC 721 for land titles as well. So there's a whole class of things that you can do with this kind of a base contract. And some of them are not necessarily tradable like this, as in, the land title stuff is not so that we have trading, it's so that we have accurate tracking of ownership. And non-fungible tokens don't just apply to things like artwork. They apply to most physical goods or individually tracked items. If you want to have a token that tracks an item, you're looking at some kind of a contract like this. So that's kind of the picture on ERC 721. The last notes I would make is EIP is Ethereum Improvement Proposal. ERC is Ethereum Request for Change, which is basically a standard that they're establishing, and they go through a standards process just like the internet for how they set up and create standards. So that's the non-fungible token. We are going to have some sort of an assignment dealing with non-fungible tokens before the end of the semester, and I know time is growing short for assignments, but we're going to sneak in one simple non-fungible token assignment somewhere in here. With that, I am going to move on to other things you can do with smart contracts.